President Trump's pick for Education Secretary Linda McMahon faced senators today in her confirmation hearing. President Trump has stated that he hopes McMahon, once confirmed, puts herself out of a job. Our next guest is hoping the same thing.
We want to welcome in Tina Descovich, the co-founder and executive director of Moms for Liberty, to the show. Tina, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, like President Trump, Tina, you want the Department of Education dismantled. Tell us why.
Well, the Department of Education, since its inception in 1979, has done absolutely nothing for the students in America. It was created to help equalize student outcomes, and it has done the exact opposite. The National Report Card was released last week, and scores are down even more than they were at COVID. And the achievement gap, which is the gap between the highest learners and the lowest learners, has grown even wider. And so it's just an epic failure.
Yeah, and I'm happy that you brought that up about the nation's report card that was released last week, because you're right. Most students were further behind than they were in 2022. So we're on a really bad trajectory here. Student learning was already in decline with COVID school closures, but it seems that there have been no improvements since. Why do you think that is?
Because schools have been focused the last several years on everything but the basics. You know, long gone are the days of reading and teaching phonics and doing math, and they've infused gender ideology. They spend classroom time talking about their feelings and social emotional learning. And, you know, there's only so many hours in a day at school. And when you're using them to do things that aren't teaching the basics, you're destined for failure.
Tina, the gap between the highest and lowest performers in school has grown by 10% since 2019. It seems that the most vulnerable and at-risk students are struggling the most. How can we fix this and get these students to a higher performance level?
Well, there's a lot of things, but first and foremost, if you close the U.S. Department of Education, there'll be more funds that go directly to the states and then directly to the schools. There is so much money spent right now on the middlemen at the U.S. Department of Education, but not just that. What the U.S. Department of Education does, they skim some of the money off of the top of the $80 billion that Congress sends over, because they have to pay their staff and do the things that they need to do to run programs. And they send it to the states, and then the states take some, and then they send it to the school districts. And so if you eliminate the Department of Education and you do block grants directly to the state and to the schools, you've eliminated that funding. But you've also eliminated all the staff that the school districts need to hire to cut through all the red tape and to process all the paperwork and to do all the forms. You know, I was on a school board from 2016 to 2020, and I know exactly how many people we had to employ in the administrative staff to manage the federal Department of Education regulations. And so get rid of it.
Yeah, that is really, really interesting. Tell us a little bit more about your time serving on a school board. What were you able to see with your boots on the ground, if you will?
I'd like to say we saw behind the education curtain when we served on school boards, because you go into the job thinking you know what's going on, and you really don't. And I served in a pretty conservative county, a lot of conservative people, teachers on staff, but they still are doing a lot of things, and not necessarily all their fault, to erode parental rights. You know, parents sometimes don't do their jobs, and so schools feel like it's their job to pick up the slack, but it's not. We have got to work with parents, whatever it takes, to educate them, to make sure that they are engaging in their full potential as being a parent, and that they're raising their children. And so school districts, you know, started making decisions about medical care and moral upbringing, and as we know, with ideologies infusing what they think was right, worldviews that they think are right, and parents really they're getting more loud and more vocal as they saw what was going on in classrooms. But it's a constant struggle in every school district across this country to keep the power with the parents, with the families, and away from the teachers' unions and the bureaucrats.
So, Tina, I got a question for you then. If you get rid of the Department of Education and everything goes down to the state level, I could see that possibly being where red states would do exactly the things that you're saying, put more emphasis on phonics and on basic education. What happens once it goes back to California and they decide to really infuse wokeism into their schools because they have control over it? How do you prevent that from happening? Or do you just say, well, that's a left-leaning state, you should move?
Well, you can't prevent, it's not being prevented right now. Have you taken a look at what's going on in the schools in California? The U.S. Department of Education doesn't have anything, it doesn't have a say in that right now. California is on its own path with extreme gender ideology being infused. They have spoken up and said that they are not even going to comply with President Trump's executive orders that he's signing that pertain to what's going on in the schools with Title IX and some other things. And so eliminating the Department of Education won't change one iota of what the state of California is doing. The people in the state of California need to voice their concerns, organize better, stand up against it, and fix these problems.
I mean, is there anything good about our Department of Education, or like you're saying, does it just need to be completely dismantled?
I know you're poking, looking for something, but I can't think of anything. The Department of Education does about three things. They manage college loans and things of that nature. That could be outsourced to a financial institution. There's no reason that the U.S. Department of Education needs to do that. And then, like I said, they take those K-12 funds from that are allocated from Congress and they distribute them back to the states. Those could be block grants that go straight to the states, straight to the schools without all the red tape, which would be better. And then the last thing they do, which we're watching through DOGE right now, is they take all of these funds and allocate them to nonprofit organizations with ideologies that don't align with most of America, don't align with what parents want their children to know. They infuse them into the schools, and that absolutely all needs to go away now.
Well, Tina Descovich, thank you so much for joining us today and imparting your wisdom. We really appreciate you being here. Thanks so much, Tina.
Man.
Absolutely.